Welcome. This is the second part of the video for week number 5, number 5B. In this one, I'm going to cover the high points to give you some tips on preparing for the exam and also for application on the module on monitoring, evaluation, and control. This is the 17th of April. This course is designed for World Vision East Africa region running in March and April 2013. So remember, as you look at the PMD Pro1 phase model, that monitoring, evaluation, and control is the shadow behind everything else. So even though there's lots of overlap between all of the phases in the life cycle, or I'm sorry, in the phase model, monitoring, evaluation, control is one that definitely goes beyond all of them. And in World Vision, I know you're familiar with monitoring and evaluation, maybe less so on control, so that might be one of the most interesting points. Just a reminder, and we emphasize this throughout the PMD Pro1 course, that the triple constraint, or the project triangle, that includes scope, cost, and time, with a quality component and all of the risks that are pushing against it, are the essence of project management. And monitoring, evaluation, and control are trying to keep that triangle in balance and trying to keep things from getting out of control. I won't go over all of this in this video, but be sure in your reading that you know the differences between monitoring and evaluation, and there's a nice little table that shows the what, why, when, and how, and also the 3 types of evaluation that are mentioned in the PMD Pro Guide. The real-time evaluation, which is conducted throughout the project. Often the midterm evaluation is the most common, the final, and then the ex post. Ex post is conducted after the completion of the project as a way of learning and trying to inform decisions for the future. I also want to emphasize that monitoring, evaluation, and control uses about every tool that you have seen in project management up until this point in the course. So there really isn't a new tool for this phase. For example, how could we use the log frame as an evaluation tool? And I hope the answer to that is obvious, that the indicators are the key measurement metrics. They give you the details on measurement, and remember that for evaluation you're primarily concerned about the change at the higher levels of outcome and goal, and for monitoring you're concerned more and more about the tangible outputs and the activities and inputs that are being conducted. There is a tool that I will mention here. It could have just as easily been mentioned during the identification and design or detailed project planning, but that's the monitoring and evaluation plan. And that takes the hierarchy of objectives information on the goal, outcomes, output, and activities directly from the log frame. It takes the indicators directly from the log frame, but then it provides a level of detail that can be used by those who are going to conduct the monitoring and evaluation processes. I like this column here, even though I don't think it's in the PMD Pro1 guide, to have a definition of terms, because often there are a lot of general vague terms listed in the hierarchy of objectives and the indicators. What will be the sources of information that you will collect to measure these indicators? What will be the methods of data collection? Who's going to collect it? What's the frequency of collection? And then this last column, extremely important, who will use the information? And general rule is, if the information is not going to be used, or you can't identify who will be using it, then don't waste your time collecting it. You all have very busy lives and a lot of demands, so you need to prioritize. This graph shows the cost and complexity of data collection. that as you're thinking about what type of data you're going to collect and how you're going to collect it, you have to think about two factors at least. How much is this going to cost? And then you have to build that into your budgets. And what's the complexity? You have to have the human resources and the ability to do it. So this graph just shows from low cost, low complexity to higher cost, higher complexity. And of course, simple observation is the cheapest. This just means as you're doing your work, you're just watching what's going on. Reviewing existing records, you're not collecting new data, you're just reading what is already there. Routine statistics, getting more complicated would be key informant interviews, which would be selecting people and trying to get some qualitative information from them. Focus group discussions would be groups of several people. Sample surveys or household surveys are much more complicated. That's actually going door to door using random sampling techniques. And then special or point studies often have a control group that does not get the intervention so that you can measure progress on the intervention group. So just know that information. Another tool that I wanted to mention here, and I could mention all the tools actually, that has a huge function, especially in monitoring, is the issues log that we talked about earlier. And the reason is, in monitoring, you're measuring progress against the design or the specific plan that was developed before the project or at the beginning of the project. And as a result of risks that occur or issues that happen during the implementation, there often can be changes that are made in the project, and those who are monitoring need to know what those changes are, why they were made, so that they can then take that into account as they're looking for the current status, because no manager wants to be evaluated or monitored against the original indicators. If those indicators, if those objectives and indicators have changed for a good reason, and you know that you're dealing with very fragile and complicated environments in international development, so changes are inevitable. So I just wanted to mention that the issues log, and here are some of the reasons. Issues often lead to variances. Variances are the difference between what was planned and what actually happened, and the issues log will explain some of those variances. Issue management often explains and in many cases justifies the variances. So as a manager, you aren't always going to be in trouble or see variances as a negative, because maybe they were changes that were needed to be made. And changes often result from issue management. Just said that. And monitoring can identify issues that have not yet been logged, altering the project manager to become more proactive. So monitoring processes will also add more issues to the issues log, and that's a good thing. Activity-based budgeting is another tool that can be used for monitoring, and the reason is because if you have detailed your budgets according to the line items, the work detail that you've got in your work breakdown structure, then you can see your expenditures according to each of those lines, and that will actually give you some financial variances. Another tool that is useful, and is mentioned in the guide, is earned value analysis, or EVA. And if you take a few minutes and look at this report, it's not a complete report, it's just something we use during the face-to-face class. Have a look at it and see what your interpretation would be of how this project is doing, because you're going to see what the planned total cost per month, and this is just running over a 6-month period, what the planned cumulative cost were, and then we have two actuals. They've reported as kind of mid-term report. They've got the actuals for 3 months, and then they also are putting in the cumulative. So if you were just to be interpreting this based upon the actual versus the planned, you'd see that they spent more money in month 1, 150 instead of 100, In month 2, they spent $350 instead of $300. In month 3, they spent $800. So they actually they've accumulated expenditures of $1,300 when what they had planned was $1,100. So you would say that they're overspent and that there's a variance of $200. Now, you might initially think, oh, that's a bad thing, but what we don't know is whether or not they've accomplished more scope in that period of time, so that they could even see that as a good thing, because maybe they've gone well over 75% of the implementation of the project. So earned value analysis takes into consideration also the progress. So this is the definition that comes from your guide. It compares the planned and actual costs for each task that's been performed, and also compares the rate of progress on each task to what was scheduled in the project plan. So to do earned value analysis, the project manager will need a more complete set of data that combines the elements of both project budget and project calendar. Just like we were saying here, that you can't necessarily interpret whether or not this project is doing well or doing poorly, or doing just as it's supposed to by reading what information is on this. Here's a little table that I don't believe is in your guide that you might find useful. These are some different earned value analysis scenarios. You'll see that the example that we just had, that this project was over budget and on schedule. So that could be a bad thing, but we probably but we didn't really know whether it was on schedule or ahead of schedule. We need more data, because if it is behind schedule and over budget, that's bad. If it's over budget and on schedule, that's bad, but it's possible it could be over budget and ahead of schedule. And so you'll see some of the other scenarios that are listed there as well. Control is the element that is brand new to international development, and it's extremely important. It's at the heart of project management, and I think it's the biggest value add probably that will come to your organization. And the question that we ask is, have you ever managed a project where you lost control of the scope, budget, or calendar? And the answer has to be thumbs up, yes, because every single manager runs into these, not necessarily because of their own failures, but just because risk become realities and issues happen, because we're dealing with very complex human change. So then the question you have to ask the manager is, what changes were made to regain control of your project? That's the essence of control. So not just control of the types of changes and that are the direct benefits to the people that are being served, or the accomplishment that leads directly toward the outcomes and the goal, but also processes through which an organization's resources are directed, monitored, and measured. And these are called internal control processes, such things as preventing and detecting fraud, protecting the organization's resources, machinery, property, and also the intangibles of reputation and intellectual property, and then lots of tools or mini tools, timesheets, communication systems, cash management, security arrangements, inventory tracking, mileage logs, etc. All right, so one of the terms that you probably know already, but I want to emphasize that is extremely important in monitoring, evaluation, and control, is this word variances. That the job of the project manager can be boiled down to the role of managing variances. So when monitoring and evaluation compares actual projects to the task, milestones, and targets in the detailed implementation plan, it comes up with variances, and then the manager manages decision-making processes to change the scope, schedule, or budget in order to keep the project under control, and that includes managing the documentation and communication of such changes and That again goes back to the detailed planning and into the issues log that we talked about earlier. So then, if there have to be changes, the manager is also responsible for making those changes and has to ask the question about his or her tolerances relative to issue escalation. Tolerances are the level of authority that have been given or negotiated to the project manager for making decisions, which changes can be made without going to someone else, and which issues need to be escalated or taken up to a higher level. Or in some cases, it could be taken down to community and partner level. So how do you make sure only authorized changes are made? The first thing is to set your tolerances in advance during the detailed planning phase. That includes time, cost, scope, risk, quality, and benefits tolerances. Discuss with your direct supervisor to identify situations that require escalation, because each supervisor might have a different standard. Use a governing structure. We talked about boards or sponsors. Make sure that the stakeholders have participation, and that continues to be honored even during the changes. So if you had a lot of participation during identification and design and the detailed planning, you can't just make changes without consulting with those stakeholders. Once again, think back to the RACI diagram. And then carefully documenting the issues and challenges that justify the changes. So you could say that the controlling process is like juggling. So if this is the project manager, the project manager's job is to control changes in scope, resources, time, justification, stakeholder management, and risk management. Okay, that's a quick overview of the highlights of this particular phase. If you have any questions, as I've always said before, don't hesitate to contact me by Skype or email or through the course website.